Welcome back to GBN America, where I'm particularly pleased and honoured to be able to talk to Rodney Scott, the 24th Chief of the United States Border Patrol, which he did from 2020 to 2021. Mr. Scott, thank you for sparing your time. You must have held one of the most difficult posts and important posts in US political life.
Well, I appreciate that acknowledgement. It's definitely challenging, both operationally and in today's world a little bit more politically. But I was honored to do what I could to help protect America.
And it's the point of protection, isn't it, where millions of people want to try and come over the border, and you had to work with the Texan authorities whilst being in charge of the federal authorities.
That's very accurate. And beyond Texas, pretty much all state and local, there's a lot of attention on America's southwest border, which is legitimate. But we also have coastal borders and the border with Canada that often get forgotten. So all of those states and both those nations are partners in the fight with us.
Yes, that's a very good point, that there are so many crimes that people try and commit across borders, but the focus is very often on illegal migration, and that's obviously on the US-Mexican border. And the numbers are very large, or have been very large in recent years. How did you try to control that? What was the biggest part of your effort?
So I was an agent for over 30 years and culminated as the chief of the Border Patrol. And over that entire time, we were systematically improving border security through a multi-pronged approach. But it was very important to put up barriers to actually slow down traffic. And some people see that as negative, but really the border wall, if you will, or those barriers were just intended to make sure people came through legal ports of entry. And then we were improving surveillance and technology, and we were making sure there was a consequence for illegal entry. When somebody did cross the border illegally, we would do our best to prosecute them. But thank you for bringing up that it's not just about immigration. What's going on today on the southwest border is that the cartels are using the mass illegal immigration to overwhelm law enforcement so they can smuggle in bigger threats. That's the real issue.
And so it's an issue of criminality, and that building a wall, to use former President Trump's terminology, was a way of helping slow down people coming, and therefore an opportunity to reduce criminality as well as the number of migrants.
That is 100% accurate. It's a force multiplier, if you will. It's like any security model. If you're having a public event, you use barriers, fences, walls to try to force people to go through your checkpoints. Those are our ports of entry. That was a strategy that had actually not just the Trump administration, but the United States had been building out for over 30 years. And then the current administration decided to go a different route and not really focus on deterrence, and it hasn't worked out so well.
Well, that's quite an understatement, and there's been a bit of a U-turn, hasn't there, in administration policy with the proposed border bill. Do you think the proposed border bill will be enough to try and bring control back to the border, if it were able to get through Congress, which is another matter?
Yeah, so the bill that was being worked on in the Senate really has hit a wall, if you will, since we're using that term. It had some good parts to it, but it really isn't the solution. The problem with in the United States today, the reason you're seeing these massive numbers of mass migration, and this would occur anywhere, is there's no consequence. People are being processed and then being released into the United States. And here we use a catchphrase called catch and release. As long as that continues, we're going to continue to see this mass migration, and then the cartel is going to have that distraction, and we're going to continue to see the cartel bring in narcotics, criminal aliens, and potentially even terrorists. The bill, unfortunately, did not end catch and release to the point some people wanted it ended, and that's why the bill failed.
And the problem with catch and release in a free country like the United States, and similarly in the United Kingdom, is that because we don't run police states, once you're released, you're basically free, aren't you? You're in the community and you'll never be found again.
Correct. That's exactly the problem. And the statistics bear that out. Even if the individuals are set up for hearings in the future and show up to a few, less than 6% of the people that are ever released into the United States that are actually ordered deported at some point are ever deported. They disappear into society. So the solution is simple. Make sure people have due process, but don't give them the prize. Don't release them until a judge has made a determination on their case. But this administration walked away from those policies, and then the result has been this complete chaos on the border.
Absolutely, because this administration wanted to be different from Donald Trump's administration and therefore basically allowed a free-for-all to begin with, and now is beginning to regret that as a consequence of political pressure. Is that a fair summary?
I think that is a fair summary. They went 180 degrees the other direction, and we're seeing the results now today.
And tell me a bit about what's going on in New York, because as an overseas observer, New York seems to have rather got what it deserved, having pretended that they were very keen on immigration whilst it was safely in Texas. Once it got to New York, they seemed less keen on it, and now they're having an argument about giving credit cards to illegal immigrants, which isn't necessarily very popular with New York voters.
I think what's really happening is the light of day, transparency. So a friend of mine, another border security colleague, basically summarized it as the left had hijacked America's compassion and made them think if you weren't welcoming and didn't allow all this criminality to take place, that you just weren't a good person. And it's easy to say that until it's in your front yard. And then now the massive numbers of migrants showing up in not just New York, but Chicago, Denver, all over the country. They just kind of slowly blended in, but there's too many. And now they're seeing firsthand what we've been seeing on the southwest border for years. And they're starting to see the dollars and cents add up. And people are starting to wake up and say, hey, this isn't really what we thought it was. And we cannot tolerate a complete open border, especially when you have so many social programs. They're just running the social programs bankrupt. And you can't feed the entire world. It just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way, and it seems unfair when New York City, as I understand it, gives more to illegal immigrants than it does to the domestic people who are facing hardship.
And that's 100% correct. And hopefully people are now seeing that. It's been going on for years, but it's just kind of been below the surface. And if anything good comes out of this, a lot of Americans are being forced to look at the situation holistically from a little bit of a different perspective. And hopefully that results in voting a little bit differently in the future. I want to be compassionate and help everybody too, but you have to keep the ship afloat to basically save anybody. And you can't take everybody onto that lifeboat, unfortunately. You got to make choices, and that's where we're at today.
Well, Mr. Scott, first of all, thank you very much for joining me today, but also thank you for your incredible lifetime of public service. Every country needs people like you to serve them. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Have a great day.